Playoffs are off and rolling. Twins MIA, and I don't mean Miami, and we all know why, but we are going through the reasons. It's part 3 of our Twins 2024 Autopsy. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren. You can unfollow me on the tweets at Brandon_WARNE. And thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And of course, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team every day. I am joined by Mr. Dave Brown. He has been a ball writer since the summer of Sosa and McGuire. He's been in the BBWAA since, well, when the Twins were terrible just after the opening of Target Field. And he's been a Hall of Fame voter ever since Joe Mauer was eligible. Mr. Dave Brown, at Answer Dave Brown on the tweets. What's up?
Hi, Brandon. I know it looks like I'm extra large, but I'm not really. It's just the camera angle, and I didn't want to change my focus because I'm focused on the show.
No, and I think that it looks good on you, and I certainly appreciate it. I don't see a milk jug behind you like before, but
we'll bring it back on special occasions.
Deal. Yeah, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And by the way, today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. So book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Dave, we are now 3 shows, 3 into our autopsy. I told Jeff Carr, because he sent out a message. So Jeff is the big guy, big boss of ours, but he also does Locked On Reds, and he's sending us his off-season schedule for content purposes. Just I kind of like to see how other shows map that out. And I said to him as kind of a joke, well, there's no rush in getting it to me because we're doing Twins autopsies where everything that went wrong gets a segment. So we probably have about 27 episodes left. And right now we're on episode, give or take, right? Yeah. So we're on episode 3. So we'll have not only Joe Ryan and what his absence down the stretch meant, Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton, not just their absences, but what their actual presence meant or didn't mean for the Twins this season. And then former Twins first-round pick having yet another lost season, now arbitration eligible. We'll see what that means as well. But those will be our topics of discussion today. And first, Dave, so I was on an airplane watching the start that Joe Ryan made at Wrigley where he left with a shoulder. And I'm just thinking, that's not good. I think I was coming back from Oregon at that time, would have been early August. And there was some discussion of if Joe Ryan felt he was as hurt as the Twins thought he was. Turns out, end of that month, he goes on the 60-day IL, ends his regular season. Twins, not in the postseason. The rest of the story is pretty academic. But that lack of starting pitch, we talked about the Twins not adding a starting pitcher at large, whether it was for the course of the full season, as in Eric Fedde, or at the deadline, as in Eric Fedde. What that would have meant had they added one, it almost felt like Ryan's injury was a penance for, baseball gods say you don't want to add a starter. Well, we'll take one from you. I mean, I don't mean to be crass, but it just kind of felt like one of those ball don't lie situations. And, the youngsters got a little overexposed down the stretch. It came at a really bad time for guys like, Zeddy Matthews got to make his major league debut. It was a good time for him in theory, but SWR wearing down and, really relying heavily on David Festa.
Yeah, a shoulder to cry on is a phrase that comes to mind with Joe Ryan's Terry's major injury. And it is the good news, I guess, jumping ahead for a second, since we're sort of dwelling on the impact that it had on the season. It should be an injury that he'll be able to come back from, given time off in the off season and rehab time and just getting right. He's not a guy too. I mean, he's a very limber fellow. So I think that will help. He's good at stretching himself out with the swimming gimmicks and all that stuff. So I think Joe Ryan in the end is going to be fine. But it was a big deal because he was, in the process of having his best season so far. We're not just talking about taking any old 32, 33 starts away. Joe Ryan missed, I think, 8 or 9 starts, and those are quality starts. Those are things that, there's a domino effect there. When you have a pitcher that can go 6 or 7 innings, it affects everybody down the line of the bullpen. Jax was a little compromised. Duran was a little compromised. Alcala, Sands, everybody was a little bit diminished because they had to work extra harder to make up for the fact that Ryan wasn't there. And it is a very similar deal to the offensive players being down. It was a huge reason why the Twins collapse happened. The Twins collapsed, I should say, or just the Twins. A huge reason why the Twins collapsed. If you want to, economy.
Well, there's a few different moments where you could say that was the beginning of the end. And, I know in Arlington, I think Alcala gave up a big home run that everyone points to, and even just the start of August. I mean, the stark contrast with how the Twins played over the final 2 months as opposed to, the middle 2 months of the season. All of those things are in the conversation, but I think Joe Ryan getting hurt and, it wasn't exactly an inspiring run of ball at that time. I think Joe Ryan, as far as if we had, you had talked about maybe doing this in terms of most influential to least. I think this would have been pretty high on the list if you were to say most influential factors as to why the Twins are doing what they're doing right now, which is either hanging out in Cancun, bagging leaves, or, any of the sort of fall things that dads like you and me do when we're not working.
Yeah, not looking forward to bagging leaves.
Nope.
Definitely, even as a responsible homeowner. Sometimes I just let them blow in the other person's yard. To be perfectly honest, I don't want the leaf police to come. But so Ryan's injury happened later in the season, but still, as far as being a catalyst, and that's a funny word, for the demise of the team. It was huge. It maybe wasn't as big as not having some of the offensive players available. Not having Correa in the lineup at shortstop killed him. Either in the lineup or on defense. That was huge. That had a big domino effect as well. But not having Ryan around, it was almost like, Pablo was kind of left by himself, and to a certain extent, Ober too. He probably had his best year overall. I'm not sure if the ERA quite matches up with that thought, but it's different when you have 3 guys going in the rotation. You only need to have maybe SWR and Festa or Zebi. One of those guys could go to the bullpen. You could go to a 6-man rotation. You could stretch out the starts in between pitchers. You don't have to worry about stacking high leverage relievers night after night after night, or using the back of the bullpen to make up for Joe Ryan not being there, or for other pitchers who are only able to get in the 4th or 5th inning, which was the case a lot with the rookies, especially down the stretch. It's just enormous. It can't be overstated what a big drag that was in the season, and ultimately, I think the Twins' energy at the end. They were losing games by the end of the season. They missed the playoffs by 4 games, 4 wins or whatever. That a lot of that is, I don't want to say they've given up, but they didn't have anything else to give at some point. Yeah. And I think Joe Ryan not being there is as big a reason as any.
If you prorate Joe Ryan's Fangraphs WAR out to 30 starts, he made 23. This is certainly not scientific. He goes from 3.1 Fangraphs WAR to 4.0. That's a fairly sizable difference for 2 months of work, less than 2 months of work. So yeah, something to think about. Hey, you mentioned a brief aside here before we come back from break, but you mentioned overworking the back end of the bullpen. What'd you think of Emmanuel Clase giving up a 3-run homer to Kerry Carpenter?
I saw some stat. Somebody said, I don't
Petrillo.
know. If it was,
Mike Petrillo.
Okay. If you thought that slider looked flat, well, of the 201 sliders that he threw, this was the 200th least sharp It was,
Yep.
I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said.
It was
And
like 213 of 214. Something. You're right on the nose, though.
right. As I said to this person who's really close to the Guardians in a way that I'm not going to divulge familial relations, I knew that Vogt's bullpen usage there was some point in the season where Clase went in 4 straight games, and they were pedal to the metal and balls to the wall and balls to the pedal, and I knew it was going to come up and bite him eventually. And I think we saw it, and maybe it has in other points of the season, but it did. They panicked a little bit and took Gaddis out before the 9th inning and made Clase do an up and down. Maybe that had something to do with it too, as far as the energy and the sitting down and getting back up again. So it finally came back to it didn't do any good for the Twins, but the Guardians going hell's bells. There was going to be hell to pay eventually.
Yeah, a lot of relievers struggling. Really good relievers getting knocked around a bit this October. Yeah, you don't have to tell us who told you, but if it was your friend Scott Paddock, blink twice. Anyway, let's go to break. We're bringing Arena Club back into the fold for most of us who like collecting cards, and I just so happen to have a few next to me right here. Here's a little Tom Brady that I think people might find kind of cool, actually. But if you're on Arena, or if you're collecting cards and you have the idea of spending, just crazy sums on a rookie card, there's a Tom Brady version of this that is, I want to say, autographed. That's a few $1,000s. And if that's just not in your budget, if that's not in the cards, so to speak, then you can check out Arena Club and their slab packs. It's arenaclub.com. It's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Now, every card that I listed, every card that I have described here, this, and some of the Ellie De La Cruz, Luka Doncic, any of those are available from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Right now, too, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb and use code lockedonmlb. That's arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb, code lockedonmlb, and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. Yeah, Dave, so we look at things that went wrong for the Twins in the second half. And some of the youngsters were overexposed. And I think that cuts a number of different ways. You could say we saw a bit too much. Well, we saw Michael Hellman, like him getting called up was not part of the plan. Certainly he was fine. Don't get me wrong. Austin Martin, maybe saw more Austin Martin than we had expected. Or we saw Brooks Lee at shortstop more than we expected. And, the more he played, the worse he seemed to get. When you look at the Twins by Fangraphs WAR, their top 2 players are Carlos Correa, 4.3 WAR. You'll take that from your starting shortstop. It's certainly maybe not, I guess, I don't know, dollars per WAR, not really a good way to measure things and never really has been. But, he was about worth his contract, I guess you could probably say. Byron Buxton, 3.7 WAR, and that was in 102 games. So your top 2 players combined for 8 WAR, or I don't know, like 80% of a Bobby Witt Jr. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have an 8 WAR guy to be good, and it doesn't mean that if you have an 8 WAR guy, you will be great. Imagine a team with Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. Could you imagine how good a team like that would be? And that's 2 guys who could do that in 1 year. The bigger issue here is that while your stars, quote unquote, performed, you had to cover 80-some games at shortstop that were not Carlos Correa, 60-some games in center that were not Byron Buxton. And so the idea that, if I were to see 2 players with 4.0 Fangraphs WAR, one in 162 games and one in 81 games, obviously the bang for your buck is going to see the 81-game player performed better. But how you filled the other 81 games matters. That's why, like, for instance, when Justin Verlander won the Rookie of the Year in 2006 over Francisco Liriano, it bothered me because I think at the time, that we were doing win shares or whatever, and Liriano just looked better, but in a smaller sample. I think there is something to be said for the best ability being availability too. And so, like, yeah, cool, Correa was a 4-win player in 86 games, but those other 80 games that he didn't have any influence in whatsoever, like that's where the limitations of WAR definitely stand out. Obviously there's WAR within the margins where you could get, like, in theory 0.1 WAR in 10 straight games, or you could have 3 crazy games and do the same. And which one's better? Well, they could both be good. You know what I mean? Like, we don't get that granular to where it's easy to break down. But when your 2 top players combine for fewer than 190 games, and then your next 2 players on the list, Willie Castro 158, Carlos Santana 150, and then Matt Wallner 75. Like, you see the haves and have-nots and how that kind of all leads to just a lot of jumbled up, like, where's the value going to come from on any given day? I'm not sure I'm articulating it the way I want to, but I understand people being upset about platoons and guys getting days off, but having your top 2 guys be as injured as they were this year is just hugely problematic.
It does kind of put a monkey into the wrench of how Rocco likes to operate a lineup. And I think how Rocco likes to operate a lineup is how probably most managers would do it. And even going back a long time, Sparky Anderson used to do platoons. This is the 70s and the 80s we're talking about. This is not recently. That's not a new thing. But I think what you're trying to say is the Twins had to give a lot of playing time to players who either couldn't perform very highly above replacement level or did so really inconsistently. There was there's too much mediocrity going on, for one reason or another. You look at Jose Miranda's first half, really strong. They didn't really overextend him. He didn't get every single at bat, even though Royce Lewis wasn't out there for many games. But in the second half, I don't know if there was an injury or what, but he was not anywhere near the same player that he was. You mentioned Wallner. He was not really around in the first half, and that meant playing Manuel Margot way much more than I think they intended to. And that was
that's when Margot was at his worst.
Yes. They gave Austin Martin a lot of different assignments, and he filled in admirably at many of them, second base sometimes, center field sometimes. But you also noticed, there was a stretch last year where the outfield defense was MIA with Buxton not in the lineup. There were some fly balls that people weren't catching, and Martin was part of that. So I don't know that it bodes poorly for the long term for some of these younger players that they were put into position to perform, and they didn't always do it. But for this past season, the Twins had way too many at bats, way too many opportunities on defense for players that didn't perform or didn't fit well. If you look at Brooks Lee, now his offensive numbers aren't very good, and his defensive metrics at short, and also the eye test, not always there. I did like, he did not seem to bother his confidence. He had some big hits, relatively speaking. They didn't get into the playoffs, but they seemed like big hits in the moment. So that's good. I think if you look at his metrics at second, there's some hope there that he can fill that hole. And if he were able to play 140 games, 150 games at second base next year, I think you're going to see a much improved player. This year, he had to play other places where maybe he wasn't at his best, and maybe playing short took away a little bit from his offensive abilities overall. So not having Correa and Buxton in the lineup for huge chunks of games put an incredible strain. We talked about Willie Castro in a past episode about what we think that might have done to his game and his performance in the second half, and he wasn't the only one. So the Twins' depth was not what we hoped it would be, what we thought it was. But if you can get Buxton north of 100 games, 110 games again, if you can get Correa north of 130, 135 games again, that's going to make a huge difference in the overall health, mental, and physical of the roster.
Well, and if you can sequence it in a way where it's spaced out, I mean, having those two guys down at the same time certainly hurts too. Yeah,
sure.
It almost felt like, I think, wasn't SNL called the not quite ready for primetime players?
Yeah, that was their nickname. Yes.
Yeah, and it kind of felt like that was, Brooks Lee. I mean, I think I got a little bit of a Brian Dozier vibe. Brian Dozier's first year was rough, and he played shortstop, and they moved him over to second. They had Paul Molitor work with him, and he became a Gold Glove second baseman. I think if he could be like a Brooks Lee, like a hybrid Dozier / Jason Kipnis type player, and not like the best of both of those guys, but just a couple different aspects. You never would have expected Kipnis to stay at short, but at the same time too, like I don't think he's going to have the power that Dozier had at his peak. But like some kind of mix and match of like an all-around player who does just a little bit of everything well. I think that is the best case scenario for a Brooks Lee. And I think we'll look back at this season as, valuable learning experience. I mean, he struck out 14.6% of the time. A guy who makes that much contact with his pedigree seems likely to still be plenty good. So let's do this. Let's take our last break. When we come back, we have a lost season from what was once a big-time Twins prospect. Now, maybe he gets non-tendered. All right, we got to give some love to our friends at Booking.com, and I grabbed the wrong ad, so you got to play with me here. You got to play me off here, Dave. I'm feeling like such an idiot. I grabbed. There we go. There we got the right one.
Hang in there, Brandon. You're doing fine, buddy.
We're just doing great. All right. This episode has been brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right state can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball, and get that Booking.com app. I tell you what, people traveling to these postseason games this October have gotten quite a treat. This second round, I think, has been, just the back and forth so far. Royals and Yankees going back and forth. The Dodgers-Padres has been crazy. Obviously, we expected Royals, Yankees, and the Guardians, Tigers to be, heated contested battles too. Anybody who's traveling for these using Booking.com is getting not only their fill of excitement on the field, but also off the field with hotels, beds and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. They have found their perfect stay even in their postseason rivals city. So, Booking.com can deliver exactly the right U.S. stay for you, help you book a stay close to your home stadium, the road stadium, or if you want to stay a little ways away from the stadium and trek in. I know I did that when I was in Fort Myers. Booking.com is the way to go. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. That's Booking.com, Booking.yeah. All right, and FanDuel. We got to give some love to FanDuel, Dave Brown. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. That's right, that's FanDuel. FanDuel.com, the FanDuel app, and you will also get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Big Sunday here. Vikings fans got to watch a win in London. We'll be keeping an eye on the status of Aaron Jones. But Vikings 5-0 heading into the bye. And the Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams looking better and better each and every week. So I know Dave and I are both eager to see how this NFL season rolls on. NFC North looks like it's going to be the literal black and blue division of teams beating each other up all season long. But FanDuel is the place to check it out. You can check out the stats, you can check out the play-by-play, and you can place your bets all in the same place. That's FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Dave, I was looking. So we were just talking about Austin Martin and Brooks Lee, and I was thinking, the Twins had 5 position players with negative Fangraphs WAR. Jair Camargo had 5 plate appearances, or 7 plate appearances, don't really care about that. Manuel Margot was minus 0.2, pretty big flop there. Again, I go back to they should have just signed Victor Robles when they had the chance and DFA'd Margot, but that was easy for me to say. Austin Martin in 93 games was a minus 0.2, and WAR doesn't always tell the whole story. Sometimes it doesn't tell the whole story at all, but I feel like he was at least capable. 94 weighted runs created plus. They hate his defense, but he also played everywhere. So it's a lot of small samples in different places that he didn't play that much. If you want to say he was a net zero for this team, I guess I wouldn't fight it that hard, but he had an okay season. Brooks Lee, minus 0.3. Again, we all know the offensive issues. The defensive issues were a little bit more pronounced in the moments they came up. But you know who else was a minus 0.3? I bet you do.
Kyle Farmer.
Alex Kirilloff.
Alex Kirilloff.
Our third segment subject. And so AK slashed 201, 270, 384. When I say someone slashed and then it's an underwhelming slash line, it almost feels wrong to call it slash because I feel like slash is like doing damage. And it's
gummed. He gummed. Like he has no teeth.
Yeah, or like when we used to talk about WARP, wins above replacement player on Baseball Prospectus.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a negative, are you a WARP, wins under replacement? Or VERP, value under replacement player? Like I always had fun with those kinds of things back then. All that whimsy that the Mets are known for. Anyway, so AK, really, really rough season. Again, deals with injuries, only plays 57 games. And if I'm not mistaken, started out pretty good, and then the numbers just tailed off after that. Usually the hallmark of a guy dealing with a wrist thing, he's had wrist stuff nonstop, pretty much as long as he's been a big leaguer. And now, he's not getting a big payday, but he is eligible for arbitration. I think it's $1 million and change, something like $1.3 million. I know Matt Swartz has it on MLB Trade Rumors, but it's not necessarily here nor there. I don't think they'd non-tender him, but one, they've been crying poor. Two, he doesn't have a great fit on this team if he's not going to be healthy. And even if he is healthy, is he going to perform? I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely not non-tendering him. I want to see what he can do. But Alex Kirilloff having another lost season, far, far from ideal.
Well, I think I recall doing shows this season, this spring, late winter, when we said we're expecting big things about Alex Kirilloff because he's going to be healthy. We didn't knock on wood enough for that because he's never really in the majors been able to express himself when he's healthy. If you look at his minor league numbers, and some guys they hit well in the minor leagues and it never ends up translating to the majors. Alex could one of those kind of guys. And he's only had one season, and that was 2023, where he was healthy enough to produce above average. He was maybe 15% above the average, the major leaguer last year as far as offensive output. So he's never really had that opportunity. And I don't know where he is physically at this point. There's no way, we talked about that Byron Buxton moment where he said, yeah, it's great. I'm going into the off season and I don't have to completely rehab a body part for the first time in 6 years. I don't know if Kirilloff is in a similar situation or not, but you asked, did he start off? Well, he started off okay. He started off April, March, 256, 315, 439, one homer. And he hit 4 homers in May, but batted only 161 and then finished the season in June 2 for 21. So obviously not what you want. And you mentioned something else, Brandon, fit. I don't know exactly why the Twins went into the season with all these left-handed hitting corner-ish, probably better left fielder type guys, that are predominantly like left-handed batters. It just seemed like overkill, having Kepler and Kirilloff and Matt Wallner and Trevor Larnach. It's 3 maybe. 4 is probably a bit too many. I don't know if they thought, well, we don't know if Carlos Santana's going to come through or what, so we need to save one of these guys for first base. But they had way too many of those kind of guys. And, really, and too many guys who can do the same kind of thing. And then when they regress, they're all, these guys who aren't really powerful enough to hit enough home runs to make up for a lower on base percentage, or they don't play good enough defense to justify giving 100 games in an outfield corner spot, or they can't really play first base. Kirilloff, I don't think, can play first base. I think the Twins missed an opportunity to trade one of these guys. Maybe it wasn't him, but
might have been.
It might have been to get something different, to address a different need somewhere else on the roster. You definitely can't really do that now. His contract, I looked it up, the estimate on MLB Trade Rumors, $1.8 million. I mean, that's not going to, with the Twins, who knows? Maybe they get enough of those together. It adds up to something significant. That in and of itself is not enough reason to just non-tender Kirilloff. But I think you go in with very short expectations and hope that he helps you out in a bench role, in a part-time role. But I don't even know if that's really that valuable anymore, the way rosters have to be constructed with a billion relief pitchers. So the Twins are in a tough spot there with him and their other Kirilloff-like players.
And he was yanked off his rehab assignment in late August with a back issue. So he had back issues, wrist issues. He's going to be 27 in November. Yeah. Like John Cena says, your time is up. Your time is now. And we haven't seen him. So we'll see what happens here with Mr. AK. But yeah, 3 things that were problematic for the Twins. And we'll have more here as we get ready for another autopsy. But hey, he's Dave Brown. I'm Brandon Warren, and we'll see ya
tomorrow
night.
Casilla. Alexei.